Memoror when my ex-husband stood up in court and said, "She's mentally unstable, she neglects our daughter." My heart stopped. The judge leaned forward, the lawyer nodded, and my stomach sank. I felt as though the ground had opened beneath me. My throat was dry, my hands trembled, and yet I couldn't speak a word. I had rehearsed my defense countless times, but in that moment, with everyone staring at me, it felt like they had already made up their minds. David stood there, dressed in his impeccably tailored suit, as smooth and composed as ever. He even glanced back at me with that smug look, the one he always wore when he knew he was winning. He looked so calm, so in control, like he had nothing to lose. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, to shout the truth, but nothing came out. I could see my little girl Emily, sitting just a few feet behind me on the bench. She was only 6 years old, her big eyes wide as she watched everything unfold. She clutched her stuffed bunny, the one she called Benny, like it was her shield. I felt as though I had failed her. I was supposed to protect her. But now, the court seemed convinced that I was the one who posed a danger. The judge started speaking, preparing to make a ruling. My ears began to ring. I could barely hear her words. All I could think was, "He's going to take her away from me." Then, I heard a small voice, clear and strong. "Your Honor," Emily said. Everyone turned. I snapped my head around, stunned. There she was, standing just barely taller than the bench, holding Benny in one hand and something clenched tightly in the other. "Your Honor, Mom doesn't know I have this video from Dad's computer, but you really need to see it." Time seemed to stop. Even David's face drained of color. His lips parted, confused, as if he couldn't understand what was happening. I blinked at Emily, frozen, trying to process what she had just said. The courtroom went completely silent. The judge looked at her, surprised but composed. "You have what?" she asked gently. Emily looked at me and then back at the judge. Her hand trembled, but her voice was steady. "I found it a few days ago when I was using Dad's laptop. I saved it. I didn't want to tell anyone unless I had to, but now I think you really, really need to see it." She stepped forward and held out what she was clutching in her hand, a small pink flash drive, one I had never seen before. The judge nodded to the bailiff. David tried to speak. "That's private property. She doesn't even know what she's talking about." But the judge held up her hand. "Let's see what's on it first." I stared at Emily, my brave, incredible daughter. I still didn't know what was on that flash drive, but something deep inside me, some primal instinct, told me that this wasn't just a child's imagination. Something real was coming, something that could change everything. I finally took a breath and, for the first time that day, I began to believe that maybe we weren't as powerless as we thought. Because Emily stood up, because she believed in the truth, and because sometimes even a 6-year-old can hold the key to justice when no one else is listening. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman sitting alone in a courtroom, fighting just to keep her child. I used to think that if you loved your child, if you gave them everything you had, that would be enough. But love doesn't always show up well on legal paper. My name is Anna Rivera. I'm 31, a single mom, and until recently, I worked 2 part-time jobs just to keep the lights on and food on the table. I never had a fancy career or a big house. But my daughter Emily had bedtime stories every night, a warm coat for winter, and a mom who never missed a parent-teacher meeting. David, my ex-husband, lives in a fancy gated community on the other side of town. He owns a successful tech company and makes sure everyone knows just how well he's doing. When we first met, I was in my early 20s, thinking that confidence meant kindness. It took me years to learn the difference. Our marriage began like a fairy tale, but ended like a cage. He never hit me. He never screamed in public. But in private, it was a constant barrage of gaslighting and control. He criticized everything about me, my cooking, my clothes, my parenting. He read my messages, interrogated me when I stayed late at work, rolled his eyes every time I cried. When I gave birth to Zoe, I struggled with severe postpartum depression that kept me bedridden. He told me I was broken, weak, ungrateful, a failure. I left when Zoe was 4. It took everything in me. I packed a single suitcase and moved into a rundown apartment with peeling walls and a leaky faucet, but it felt like freedom. I got a receptionist job at a local clinic during the day and worked as a janitor at night. My sister, Emily, helped take care of Zoe whenever I had late shifts. My mom, Teresa, who lived in a different state, called me every day, offering encouragement, sometimes just reminding me to eat. They were my lifelines. Ethan got visitation rights. At first, I tried to keep things civil. I forced a smile as we exchanged Zoe in the parking lot. I told her, "Your dad loves you," even though I noticed how withdrawn she became after every visit. But the way she clung to me afterward made it clear. Whatever Ethan said behind closed doors, it wasn't love. Last fall, Ethan filed for full custody. He claimed I was mentally unstable, that I was creating an unsafe environment, that I was neglecting Zoe. It felt like being stabbed with a lie I couldn't possibly disprove. He submitted screenshots of old texts I sent Emily during my lowest days, twisted to make me look unhinged. He even told the court I left Zoe home alone at night. That was a lie. I always had Emily stay over when I worked late, but Ethan knew how to twist the truth just enough to plant doubt. I hired the best lawyer I could afford, which wasn't much. I gathered school records, pediatrician notes, even letters from neighbors who'd seen nothing but love in our home. But I knew how it looked. Ethan had the money, the connections, the narrative. I only had the truth and a voice that was tired from fighting to survive. The night before the hearing, I sat with Zoe at the kitchen table. She was drawing a picture of us holding hands under a rainbow. I asked her how she felt about tomorrow. She said, "I feel safe with you, Mommy. That's all I want to tell the judge." I hugged her so tightly, she squeaked. I didn't know she was already planning something bigger. The next morning, I put on my best blazer, one that barely fit after stress had caused me to lose weight. I tied my hair back and stood in front of the mirror, telling myself that I could do this. But nothing could prepare me for the way Ethan's words hit when spoken aloud in that courtroom. Mentally unstable, neglectful. The labels echoed in my mind. I sat there feeling like the truth didn't matter, like I was already invisible, like no matter how hard I'd fought, he was going to win. But Zoe was watching, and she wasn't going to let that happen. The courthouse smelled like old paper and cold metal. The benches were hard, the air dry, and everything inside felt designed to make people feel small. I sat beside my lawyer, Mrs. Johnson, a soft-spoken woman with tired eyes and a no-nonsense voice. She had reviewed every document I gave her, but I could tell even she was nervous. Ethan walked in with his lawyer, Mr. Daniel Wright. He was everything I expected: sharp suit, expensive briefcase, and a look that said he was used to winning. Ethan nodded at Mr. Wright as if they were old friends. When he saw me, he didn't smile, but he didn't need to. His silence was smug enough. Zoe sat behind me with Emily. She wore her favorite blue dress and had her stuffed bunny, Henry, tucked under her arm. Her legs didn't reach the floor, so they swayed gently back and forth. She didn't say much that morning, but she hugged me tightly before we entered the courtroom. I whispered to her that no matter what, I loved her more than anything in this world. The hearing began, and my hands trembled. My attorney went first, presenting the basic facts. She emphasized that Zoe was well cared for, with consistent school attendance, up-to-date medical records, and a stable home life. She submitted character references from Zoe's teacher, our neighbor Mrs. Miller, and Emily. She pointed out that all claims made by Ethan were unsubstantiated, lacking police reports or CPS involvement. Then, Mr. Wright stood. His voice was calm and measured, but there was a certain sharpness to it. He painted me as an emotional liability. He began, "Your Honor, my client is deeply concerned for his daughter's well-being. Miss Rivera has a documented history of emotional instability. We have text messages showing irrational behavior, inconsistent communication patterns, and indications of neglect." He submitted messages I had sent to Emily during a particularly tough week the year before. In them, I wrote things like, "I can't do this anymore, and I feel like I'm falling apart. I've been exhausted, anxious, barely sleeping." But those words, taken out of context, made me sound dangerous. Then came the real punch. Miss Rivera left her daughter alone in the apartment for 4 hours on multiple occasions while working late. We have a witness statement to that effect. I blinked, my heart racing. I turned to my attorney. That was a lie. Emily had always been there. I never left Zoe alone. Not once. Miss Johnson objected immediately. Your Honor, we dispute the accuracy of that witness and will provide testimony from Miss Rivera's sister. But the judge didn't look at me. She was already scribbling something down on her notepad. My stomach twisted. Ethan sat there, arms folded, cool and composed. He didn't look at me even once. He looked at the judge the way he used to look at clients. Charming, agreeable, professional. He had perfected the image of the concerned father, the one who only wanted what was best for his daughter while making me out to be unstable and unfit. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and shout the truth. But when I opened my mouth, my voice cracked. I could feel the weight of every time he told me I was crazy, every time he told me no one would believe me. I had walked into that courtroom armed with facts, but he had walked in with a performance. When it was my turn to speak, I tried to steady myself. I explained the texts. I explained the nights I worked and how Emily had always been with Zoe. I said the accusations were lies meant to discredit me. I told the judge I had never once put my daughter in danger, but my words felt so small. Ethan's lawyer objected constantly, forcing pauses, making it feel like I was scrambling. The judge asked few questions. Her face remained unreadable. By the end of my testimony, I could feel the momentum slipping away. Miss Johnson leaned toward me and whispered that we might need to consider a temporary agreement until we could gather more evidence. My heart sank. Temporary meant Ethan would have full custody until the next hearing. It meant Zoe would live with him. It meant I would only see her on scheduled visits and with supervision. After everything I had done to create a safe, stable home for her, that was what it might come down to. The judge cleared her throat, preparing to speak. That was when Zoe stood up. She didn't ask anyone. She didn't look for permission. She simply rose, holding her stuffed bunny in one hand and something else in the other. A flash drive. Her voice rang through the courtroom, small but certain. Your Honor, Mom doesn't know I have this video from Dad's computer, but you should see it. Everything stopped. At first, no one moved. Zoe's voice had pierced through the courtroom like the sound of glass breaking. It was quiet, but it landed with weight. Every head turned. The judge leaned back slightly, her eyes fixed on my daughter, as though trying to understand what she had just heard. Zoe took a step forward. She still held her stuffed bunny, but her shoulders were squared, her small frame exuding an unexpected confidence. In her other hand was a small pink flash drive, the kind we used at home to back up school projects. Your Honor, she said again. This is important. I found it on Daddy's computer. I think it shows something you should know. My heart stopped. I wanted to jump up and go to her to stop her, to shield her from what was happening. But something in her voice held me still. She wasn't scared. She was steady, strong. The judge looked at David. Mr. Rivera, do you know what this child is referring to? David shifted in his seat, and for the first time that day his expression cracked. She's 6 years old. She doesn't know what she's talking about. The judge raised her hand. I wasn't asking you to speak for her. Emily, come forward, please. Emily walked with slow, careful steps toward the bench. She held out the flash drive with both hands, like it was sacred. The bailiff came forward and gently took it from her, then walked it to the judge's assistant. There was a computer connected to the courtroom projector. The judge nodded to have the contents played. David stood up. I object to this being entered without prior review. It could be doctored. It's from a personal device. There's no chain of custody. The judge turned to him, firm and calm. You've made several serious accusations today. If your daughter says she has something relevant, I intend to review it. You'll be given a chance to respond after. David sat back down, but now he looked unsettled. He stared at the screen as if trying to remember what might be on that drive. I reached back and took Emily's hand. She leaned into me and whispered, I didn't mean to snoop, Mommy. I just didn't want anyone to lie about you anymore. I squeezed her hand and nodded. I was too full to speak. The screen lit up. The room went silent. The first video clip was a screen recording. David was on a video call with a friend I didn't recognize. He laughed as he spoke. She doesn't even know I still have those texts from when she had that breakdown. I'm telling you, I'm going to win this. Make her look like she's mentally unfit. It's not even hard. She actually believed I'd settle for joint custody. Laughter came from the other end. David grinned, eyes gleaming. Bro, I've been building this for months. I knew the court would eat it up. All I need is one witness to say she left the kid alone once or twice, and boom. Done. There was no mistaking the voice, no mistaking the intention. The second video was even worse. This time, it was grainy home footage, apparently from a security camera or webcam. Emily was sitting at the kitchen table in David's house, quietly coloring. He was in the background, on the phone, pacing and shouting. I'm not dealing with this brat right now, he snapped. I don't care what she wants. She's not getting it. She's just like her mother, needy and exhausting. Emily looked down at her paper and flinched at the sound of his voice. She didn't say a word, just kept coloring. That silence hit harder than any scream could have. When the video ended, no one spoke. The judge leaned forward, both hands clasped tightly. She looked first at David, then at me, then at Emily. Emily, thank you for bringing this to our attention. You were very brave, she said. Emily nodded once and returned to her seat beside Lana. The judge then turned to Mr. Wright. Would you like to proceed with your custody claim? Mr. Wright hesitated. Your Honor, I request a recess. The judge shook her head. Request denied. I've seen enough for today. David looked like a balloon that had been pricked, airless, stunned. His attorney whispered something urgently, but he didn't respond. I sat frozen, still holding Emily's hand. The judge spoke again. Effective immediately, I'm suspending Mr. Rivera's custody privileges pending a formal investigation. Temporary full custody is granted to Miss Rivera. Further visitation will require a court-appointed supervisor. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. It wasn't over, but the tide had turned. All because my daughter had stood up and told the truth. The courtroom was still. Nobody moved. Not the attorneys, not the judge, not even Ethan. The air felt heavier, charged with the kind of tension you only feel in moments that shift the ground beneath your feet. I sat holding Zoe's hand, still unsure if what had just happened was real. The flash drive, the videos, the judge's ruling. It was as if my world had cracked open. But instead of falling apart, light had poured in. Ethan didn't say a word. For the first time since I'd known him, he had no rebuttal, no smug look, no twisting of words. The mask had slipped, and everyone had seen the face beneath it. His lawyer tried to speak, tried to salvage something, but the judge waved him off with a firm shake of her head. This matter is no longer just about custody, she said. It's about conduct, manipulation, and potential emotional harm to a minor. We will be referring this for further legal review. My lawyer leaned over and whispered, We won, at least for now. I wasn't thinking about victory. I was watching Zoe. She sat calmly next to Emily, her stuffed bunny tucked into her lap, her little legs swinging again. She looked lighter somehow, less afraid. She didn't smile, but there was peace in her expression I hadn't seen in months. The judge addressed the room. I want to commend Zoe for her bravery today. It's not easy for a child to speak in this environment. What she shared changed the trajectory of this case and possibly protected her from further harm. She looked directly at me, her voice softened just enough to feel human again. Miss Rivera, I trust you understand how serious this is. You have full temporary custody until further review. Supervised visitation will be arranged through the court. A child psychologist will be assigned to assist Zoe during this process. We will reconvene in 30 days for a formal review. I nodded. My voice hadn't returned yet. I was afraid that if I tried to speak, I would cry, and I didn't want to break down here, not in front of Ethan, not in front of Zoe. The judge stood. This hearing is adjourned. The sound of the gavel striking the bench snapped the room back into motion. papers shuffled. People stood. Ethan's lawyer began speaking to him in hushed, urgent tones, but Ethan looked straight ahead, his face pale and unreadable. Miss Johnson touched my arm and whispered, "You did everything right. Be proud of that." I thanked her and turned to Emily, who stood with her arms wide open. I hugged her tightly and then knelt in front of Zoe. "You were so brave today," I said. "Do you know that?" Zoe nodded, serious and calm. "I didn't want them to think you were bad. I knew the truth. I just wanted them to know too." I kissed her forehead. "You did more than that. You protected both of us." As we walked out of the courthouse, reporters had begun gathering outside. I kept my head down. I didn't want the spotlight. I just wanted to take my daughter home. When we got to the car, Zoe climbed into her booster seat and buckled herself in. I slid into the driver's seat and stared ahead for a long moment. I had prepared myself to lose today. I had prepared myself to beg for every hour I could get with my child. I had rehearsed my answers, gathered documents, written letters. But in the end, it was Zoe's voice that saved us. That night, after dinner, she curled up beside me on the couch with her bunny. I asked her if she was okay, if she felt scared during the hearing. "A little," she said, "but I felt strong too." She looked up at me. "I remembered what you told me once, that telling the truth is always the right thing, even when it's hard." I hugged her close. Later, when she was asleep, I stood in her doorway, watching her breathe, peaceful and safe. I thought about how close we came to losing each other. Not physically, but in the way trauma can pull people apart, even when they love each other deeply. But today we held on. And today, we won something bigger than a custody ruling. We reclaimed our truth. We reclaimed our voices. Emily reminded me of something I had forgotten in all the years of surviving. Courage is not always loud. Sometimes it's a 6-year-old standing in court with a flash drive. The weeks after the hearing moved slowly, like the world was catching its breath. I had gone into that courtroom prepared to lose. Instead, I walked out, holding my daughter's hand, and something much stronger than a legal win. I walked out with my voice back. David didn't contact us. The court issued a protective order that barred any unsupervised communication while the investigation was underway. He didn't show up to the first scheduled supervised visitation. By the second appointment, his lawyer had requested a postponement, citing mental health concerns and reputational damage. I didn't feel sorry for him. I felt nothing. After all the manipulation, all the gaslighting, all the years of walking on eggshells, I finally understood what it felt like to stand without fear. Emily began sleeping through the night again. She stopped flinching at sudden noises. She started singing in the shower, humming to herself while coloring, reading books out loud in silly voices like she used to. Her drawings filled the refrigerator. Every day I saw pieces of her joy returning. That, more than anything, told me we had done the right thing. One morning, a few weeks later, she sat beside me at breakfast. I was packing her lunch, and she was finishing her cereal when she looked up and asked, "Do you think Daddy is mad at me?" I knelt beside her. "No, sweetie. I think Daddy is learning that when people do something wrong, they have to face the truth. That's not your fault. That's something grown-ups are supposed to do." She nodded and went back to eating. That was the moment I realized how heavy the burden had been for her. For a 6-year-old to carry that kind of secret, to feel like the outcome of a courtroom hinged on a video she found, it was more responsibility than any child should ever hold. But somehow, she had held it with grace and strength. I started therapy the week after the hearing. I had spent so long in survival mode that I didn't even know how to feel safe. My therapist told me that trauma doesn't just come from violence, it also comes from silence. From years of not being believed, from doubting your own memory because someone taught you to. She said I had been gaslit so thoroughly that I began shrinking inside my own life. But I wasn't shrinking anymore, I was growing. My relationship with Emily deepened too. She had always been there for me, but I hadn't let her see how broken I felt. Now we talk nearly every night. Sometimes we laugh, sometimes we cry, but we're not pretending anymore. That kind of honesty is healing. About a month after the hearing, I got a call from the judge's clerk. David's legal team had withdrawn their petition for full custody. No further hearings were scheduled. The investigation into his behavior was ongoing, but for now, I had full custody of Emily, and there was no sign he would be contesting it again. I stood in my living room holding the phone, stunned. I didn't cheer or jump or cry. I just stood there, breathing slowly, fully. That night, I made Emily her favorite dinner. Dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets, mac and cheese, and strawberries with whipped cream. We lit candles just because it felt like a celebration. And when she asked why, I told her, because we're safe. Before bed, she brought out a piece of paper from her backpack. It was a drawing she had made at school. The two of us holding hands, standing in front of a house with sunflowers in the front yard. Above our heads were the words, "Me and Mommy were brave." I hugged her so tight, she squealed with joy. Then I kissed her forehead and whispered, "You saved us." I'll never forget that moment. Lying in bed later that night, I stared at the ceiling and thought about everything we had come through. I thought about how close I came to believing I was what David said I was. Unstable, unfit, weak. But the truth had survived, and my daughter had carried it across the finish line. This story isn't just about a courtroom or a custody battle. It's about how easily women are made to question themselves, how quickly truth gets buried under power and presentation. But it's also about resilience, about the quiet strength of a little girl who saw through lies and spoke up when it mattered most. I used to wonder if my voice was enough. Now I know it is, and so is hers. Our story didn't end in that courtroom. That was where it began. If this story moved you, if it made you think about how powerful truth can be, even when spoken by the smallest voice, please take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who might need to hear it today. If you've ever felt unheard, misjudged, or underestimated, I see you. And I hope this reminded you that your voice matters more than you think. Drop a comment below and tell me what part of the story hit you the hardest, or share your own experience. I read every single one. And if you want more true stories that speak to the heart, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you for being here. You're not alone.